What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TBI Talk. Today, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people with traumatic brain injury understand deeply, and that is the invisible part of TBI, the invisible side. Because one of the hardest parts about living with a brain injury is that a lot of the symptoms that are obvious are not visible from the outside. You've heard before, you sound fine. You walk into a room and seem normal. You can have a conversation. You can smile. You can laugh. You can post online. You can go out in public. And because people see that, they assume you must be okay. But what they don't always see is what happens behind the scenes. They don't see the mental fatigue. They don't see the headaches. They don't see the sensory overload. They don't see how much effort it takes to focus. They don't see how long it takes to recover after a normal day. They don't see the frustration of forgetting something simple. They don't see the anxiety that can come from trying to keep up with conversations. They don't see how loud sounds, bright lights, crowded places, or too much information at once can completely drain you. And that can be really hard because when people can't see what they're dealing with, they may not understand it. And when they don't understand it, sometimes they tend to minimize it. They might say things like, "You look fine. You seem better now. But you were able to do that yesterday. You just need to push through it." Everybody gets tired. You're probably overthinking it. And even if they don't mean to hurt you, those comments can make you feel alone. They can make you feel like you have to prove your injury. They can make you feel like you have to explain yourself over and over again. And that can get exhausting. So today, I want to talk about what it's like to live with the invisible symptoms of traumatic brain injury, to give you some affirmation. I want to talk about brain fatigue, overstimulation, memory problems, emotional changes, and the pressure to appear okay when you're not really feeling okay. And I also want to talk about something important. Just because someone looks fine does not mean that they are not struggling. And just because your injury is invisible does not mean it is not real. Part 1. TBI is not always what people expect. When a lot of people hear the words traumatic brain injury, they imagine something very obvious. They might picture someone in a hospital bed. They might picture someone with visible injuries. They might picture someone who can't walk, can't talk, or can't function in an obvious way. And yes, for some people, traumatic brain injury can look like that. But for many others, TBI is much less visible. A person can look completely normal on the outside, and still be dealing with serious symptoms on the inside. That's one of the reasons brain injury can be so misunderstood, because people often judge health by appearance. If you look sick, people believe you. If you look injured, people believe you. If you have a cast on your arm, people understand why you can't lift something heavy. If you have crutches, people understand why you're walking slower. But when the injury is in your brain, it's different. There may not be a cast. There may not be a bandage. There may not be a visible sign that says, "Hey, this person's brain is working harder than it used to." So people assume everything is just fine. But the brain controls everything. It controls focus, memory, balance, emotions, energy, sleep, processing speed, speech, vision, decision making, stress tolerance. It, and when the brain gets injured, even if the outside of the person looks okay, the inside can feel completely different. That is something people need to understand. A brain injury is not always visible, but it can affect almost every part of life. How's that for powerful? Part 2. The pressure to look normal. Ugh, that word. One thing that can happen after a TBI is you start feeling pressure to act normal. I know for me, for instance, when I went back to school after getting the TBI, very draining. You may feel pressure from other people, but you may also put that pressure on yourself. You might think, "I don't want people to think I'm weak. I don't want to keep explaining this. I don't want to seem different. I don't want people to feel bad for me. I don't want people to be treated. I don't want to be treated like I can't do anything. So you try to push through. You try to act okay. You try to keep up. You try to hide how tired you are. You try to laugh when you're overwhelmed. You try to stay in conversations, even when your brain is struggling to process everything. You try to say yes when your body and brain is telling you clearly no. And maybe for a little while, you can pull it off. But later, it catches up with you. You get home and crash. Your head hurts. Your brain feels tired. You feel irritated. You feel foggy. You feel like you need silence. You might need hours or even days to feel like yourself again. And and that's the part people don't see. They saw you at an event. They saw you at work. They saw you talking. They saw you smiling. So they assume you were fine. But they didn't see what it cost you. And that's the important part. And that's the important point. Sometimes people with TBI can do something, but that doesn't mean it doesn't cost them. Being able to do something once does not mean that they can do it all the time. Being able to handle something for an hour does not mean you can handle it all day. Being able to seem okay in public does not mean you feel okay privately. That difference matters. Part 3. Brain fatigue is different from normal tiredness. One of the biggest invisible symptoms of TBI is brain fatigue. And brain fatigue is not the same as normal tiredness. Everybody gets tired. Everybody has long days. Everybody needs rest. But brain fatigue after TBI can feel different. It can feel like your brain is shutting down. It can feel like thinking becomes harder. It can feel like words are harder to find. It can feel like simple decisions become overwhelming. It can feel like your patience disappears. It can feel like your memory gets worse as the day goes on. It can feel like you hit a wall, and once you hit that wall, pushing harder doesn't always help. In fact, pushing harder can sometimes make it even worse. It can be really frustrating, especially if you used to be able to do more and much more at that. You might remember a time when you could work all day, run errands, talk to people, answer messages, and still have energy left. Then, after the injury, normal tasks feel heavier. Going to the store can be draining. Having a long conversation can be draining. Being around noise can be draining. Focusing on paperwork can be draining. Even making plans can be draining. And it's not because you were lazy, it's because your brain is using more energy to do things that used to be and feel automatic. That is one of the hidden parts of TBI. The effort is invisible. People see the task. They don't see the energy it takes you. They see you answering a question. They don't see how hard your brain is working to find the right words. They don't see you walking through a store. Or excuse me, they see you walking through a store. They don't see how the lights, sounds, movement, and decisions are all hitting your brain at once. They don't see you sitting there quietly. Or they see you sitting there quietly. They don't see that your brain is overloaded. That is why brain fatigue needs to be taken seriously, because it's real, and it could affect everything. Part 4. Overstimulation and sensory overload. Another invisible part of TBI is overstimulation. This is when your brain has trouble handling too much input at once. And input can mean a lot of things: sounds, lights, movement, crowds, conversations, notifications, background noise, people talking over each other, bright stores, busy restaurants, fast-moving videos, even strong emotions. Before a brain injury, you may not have noticed these things as much. You could walk into a store and just shop. You could sit in a restaurant and enjoy dinner. You could be around a group of people and follow the conversation. But after TBI, those same environments can feel completely different. A grocery store can feel overwhelming. The lights are bright. The carts are moving. People are walking around you. Music is playing. Announcements are happening. You're trying to read labels. You're trying to remember what you came for. You're trying to make decisions. And all that is happening all at the same time. Someone else is just shopping. To someone else, it's just shopping. To you, It might feel like your brain is being hit from every direction. That is sensory overload. And when that happens, you might become irritable. You might feel anxious. You might feel dizzy. You might get a headache. You might feel like you need to leave immediately. You might stop being able to think clearly. And again, from the outside, people may not understand. They might think you're being dramatic. They might think you're in a bad mood. They might think you're impatient. But really, your brain is overloaded. That's a huge difference. And it's why people with TBI often need breaks. Quiet spaces, sunglasses, headphones, shorter outings, and or time to recover afterward. Those things are not about being difficult, but they are about managing symptoms. They are all about protecting the brain. Part 5. Memory issues can be embarrassing. Memory problems are another invisible symptoms that can be really hard to deal with because memory issues don't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it's not that you forget everything. Sometimes it's smaller things. You forget why you walked into a room. You forget what someone just told you. You forget an appointment. You lose your keys. You forget a word in the middle of a sentence. You ask the same questions twice. You forget a step in a task. You forget where you left off. And that happens over and over again. It can be embarrassing. You may start worrying what people think. You may start worrying that people think you're not listening. You may worry that people think you don't care. You may worry that people think you're unreliable. But memory issues after TBI are not about not caring. They're about not trying. Excuse me. They're not about being careless. A lot of the time the person is trying really hard, but the brain is not storing or retrieving information the same way it did. And that can be scary because memory is connected to identity. When you forget things you used to remember easily, you can feel like a whole different person, unlike yourself. It can make you feel frustrated. It can make you feel insecure. And one of the hardest things is when someone says, "Hey, I already told you that." That phrase can hurt a lot. Trust me, I know. Because most of the time, one person with TBI knows that they're struggling already. They don't need to be shamed. They need support. A better response might be, "No problem, I'll remind you," or "Let's write it down together," or "I know this can be hard to remember. Let's make a system to solve that issue." That kind of support can make a big difference. And for the person with TBI, using tools can help too. Here are some, for instance: notes, calendars, alarms, checklists, whiteboards, voice memos, text reminders. These are not signs of weakness. And strategies matter. Part 6. Emotional changes after TBI. Now I want to talk about something that people don't always understand. TBI can affect emotions. Most often, it does. And this could be one of the most difficult parts. After a brain injury, some people feel more emotional than before. Some people can get irritated more easily. Some people cry more easily. Some people feel anxious. Some people feel depressed. Some people feel overwhelmed faster. Some people feel like their emotions go from 0 to 100 so quickly. And that can be confusing. You may think, why am I reacting like this? Why am I so frustrated? Why can't I just calm down, take a breather? Why does this bother me so much now, and it used to not? But when the brain is injured, emotional regulation can be affected. Also, when you're tired, overstimulated, in pain, or trying to keep up all day, your emotional tolerance can get lower. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're making excuses. It means your brain and nervous system may be under more stress than people realize. And this is where patience becomes important. Not just patience from other people, but patience with yourself. You might need to learn your triggers. You might need to notice when you're feeling overloaded. You might need to take breaks before you reach the breaking point. You might need to apologize sometimes, but also understand why it happened. You might need to say, "I'm not mad at you, I'm overwhelmed," or "I just need a few minutes to calm my brain down," or "I'm having a hard time processing everything right now." That kind of communication can help because sometimes the people around you don't always understand what's happening unless you explain it. But also, the people around you need to understand that emotional symptoms are not fake. They are not just an attitude problem. They could be part of the injury. Part 7. The loneliness of being misunderstood. One of the hardest parts of invisible symptoms is the loneliness. Because when people don't understand what you're going through, I'll, you can start to feel isolated. You might stop explaining because you're tired of explaining. You might stop explaining, or you might stop asking for help because you don't want to feel like a burden. You might stop making plans because you don't know how you'll feel that day. You might start hiding your symptoms because you don't want people judging you. And slowly, that can make your wheel and slowly that can make your world feel smaller. That's why awareness matters and why talking about TBI matters. That's why TBI talk matters. Because people need to hear what it is really like, not just the medical definition, not just the diagnosis, but the daily experience. The part where you have to plan your energy, the part where you have to recover after normal activities, the part where you want to be included, but you also need people to understand your limits, the part where you're trying your best, but your best looks different depending on the day. That is real. And if you are someone dealing with this, I want you to know you are not alone. There are other people who understand this. There are other people who know what it's like to look fine, but feel completely drained. There are other people who know what it's like to be misunderstood. And just because some people don't get it does not mean your experience is not valid. Think about that. 8. Good days and bad days. Another thing people need to understand about TBI is that symptoms can change from day to day. You can have a good day, then you can have a bad day. You can do something one day and struggle with it the next. And that can confuse people. You might say, or they might say, but you were fine yesterday, or you did this before, or don't worry, you did this already, or I thought you were better. But recovery is not always a straight line. Symptoms can depend on sleep, stress, weather, noise, pain, hydration, screen time, emotional pressure, how busy the day was, how much you did the day before. So yes, someone might be able to go out one day and need the rest the second day or the next day. Someone might be able to focus in the morning but struggle at night. Someone might be able to handle a small gathering but not a loud, crowded room. It doesn't mean that they're faking. It means symptoms fluctuate. And that is normal for a lot of people with brain injuries. This is why flexibility matters. If you love someone with a TBI, try not to judge their whole condition based on one good moment. A good moment does not erase the injury. A good day does not mean every day is easy. And for one person with TBI, try not to judge yourself too harshly on the bad days. Bad days do not erase your progress. They are part of the process. Part 9. Learning your After a TBI, learning your limits become really important. And I know that can be hard because nobody wants to feel limited. Nobody wants to say, I can't do as much as I used to. Nobody wants to plan their life around their symptoms. But learning your limits is not about it's not the same as giving up. It's a way of protecting your progress. If you know that too much noise causes symptoms, you can plan for that. If you know that long screen time makes your headaches worse, you can take breaks. If you know that doing too much in one day causes a crash the next day, you can pace yourself. If you know that multitasking causes mistakes, you can do one thing at a time. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. There is strength in knowing yourself. There is strength in saying, this is what helps me function better. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop before you crash. Test, or rest, before you are completely depleted. Take a break before your brain forces you to. Leave yourself before you leave early before you become overwhelmed. Use tools before you forget. That is not failure. That is management. And managing symptoms is part of recovery. Part 10, how others can support someone with TBI. If someone watching this has a loved one with a traumatic brain injury, here are some ways you can support them. First, believe them. If they say they're tired, believe them. If they say the lights are too much, believe them. If they say they need a break, believe them. Do not make them prove their symptoms to you. Second, be patient. If they forget something, try not to shame them. If they need something, repeat it kindly. If they need more time to process, give them time. Third, reduce pressure. Pressure can make symptoms worse. Instead of rushing them, help create a calmer environment. Fourth, ask what helps. Everyone's brain injury is different. So instead of assuming, ask what helps you feel overwhelmed. Do you want quiet? Do you need a break? Could writing this down help? Fifth, understand that support does not mean doing everything for them. Sometimes support means giving someone space to do something at their own pace. Sometimes it means being nearby. Sometimes it means helping them set up sometimes it means helping them set up systems. Sometimes it means encouraging independence while still being understanding. And finally, remember that the person is still a person. And finally, remember that the person is still the person. They may have changed in some ways. They may need support. They may have symptoms, but they still deserve respect. They still deserve dignity. They still deserve to be included. They are not the injury. Part 11. What I would say to someone with TBI. If you are living with a traumatic brain injury and you feel misunderstood, I want to say this directly to you. You do not have to prove your pain for it to be real. You do not have to look injured for your injury to matter. You do not have to explain every symptom to every person. You do not have to feel guilty for needing rest. You do not need to be the old version of yourself to be valuable. And you do not have to rush your healing to make someone feel comfortable. Your recovery is yours. Your pace is yours. Your symptoms are real. Your effort counts, even when people don't see it. And maybe today was hard. Maybe yesterday was hard. Maybe you're tired of people not understanding. Maybe you're tired of feeling like you have to act okay. But I want you to know that needing support does not make you weak. Having limits does not make you broken. Taking longer does not make you less capable. You are still here. You are still trying, and that matters. Part 12. Redefining strength. Before my experience with brain injury, I think I looked at strength differently. A lot of people think strength means pushing through everything, never stopping, never complaining, never needing help, never slowing down. But I don't think that's the full picture anymore. Sometimes strength is being honest what you need. Sometimes strength is taking a break before you collapse. Sometimes strength is asking for help. Sometimes strength is saying no. Sometimes strength is explaining your symptoms even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes strength is trying again after a bad day. Sometimes strength is accepting what your life Sometimes strength is accepting that your life may look different, but it can still have meaning. That is real strength, because pretending to be okay all the time is exhausting. But being honest takes courage, and learning how to live with an invisible injury takes a lot of courage, more than people realize. Part 13. Why talking about this matters. This is why I think conversations about TBI are important, because people need awareness. Not just awareness that traumatic brain injury exists, but awareness of what it actually feels like. People need to understand that recovery is not always simple. They need to understand that someone can look okay and still be struggling. They need to understand that symptoms can change. They need to understand that brain fatigue is real. They need to understand that sensory overload is real. They need to understand that emotional changes are real. They need to understand that memory problems are real. And most importantly, They need to understand that people with TBI deserve patience and respect. The more we talk about it, the less alone people feel. And the more others understand, the better they can help support the people in their lives who are dealing with this. That is part of the purpose of TBI Talk, to make these conversations more normal, to give words to things people might be feeling but not know how to explain, to remind people that they are not alone. Closing message. So, if there's one thing I want people to take this, so thing that I want to take, so if there's one thing I want people to take from this video, it is this. Invisible does not mean imaginary. Just because you can't see someone's symptoms does not mean that they are not real. Just because someone looks fine, it may not mean that they feel fine. Just because someone can do something once does not mean that it doesn't take effort. And just because someone needs more time, more rest, or more support does not mean that they are not trying. Traumatic brain injury can affect a person in ways that are not obvious. And that is why compassion matters, patience matters, understanding matters, and for people living with TBI, self-compassion matters too. You are allowed to take your symptoms seriously. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to use strategies. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to have good days, and you're allowed to have bad days. And you're allowed to still be proud of yourself. Because living with an invisible injury takes strength. Jesus blesses us with that strength. I know, trust me, with my experience. And even if nobody else sees how hard you're working, your effort still counts. Outro. That's why I wanted to talk. That's what I wanted to talk today. That's what I wanted to talk about today on TBI Talk. If this message connected with you, or if you know someone dealing with a traumatic brain injury, share this with them. Like this video too. Sometimes people just need to hear that. Sometimes people just need to hear what they're experiencing is real. And sometimes family and friends need help understanding what they can't see. Hey, thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. Be patient with yourself. And remember, just because the injury is invisible does not mean the battle isn't real. See you in the next episode. This is Ryan from TBITalk.com saying God bless.